Plan Commission meeting of Tuesday, September 23rd, 2014. Roll call.
Dickman here.
Johnston here.
Carrillo here.
Scafidi here.
Guzikowski here.
Seifert here.
Chandler here.
Correll and Alderman Bekavich are excused. Item 2, minutes of the September 9th, 2014 meeting.
Dickman makes a motion that we accept the minutes of the September 9th, 2014 meeting.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Carrillo, aye.
Scafidi abstains.
Guzikowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Item 3 is significant common council actions. Carrie?
The council approved an amendment to sections 14.40C and 14.82 of the municipal code to specify a maximum of 8 parcels or outlots that may be divided by a certified survey map for properties that are zoned for commercial, industrial, or mixed-use development. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Item 4A, new business, plan review for site and building plans submitted by Pat Lawler. We Energies for an expansion to the outdoor coal storage, a coal reclaimer, and associated equipment at the Elm Road Generating Station located at 10770 South Chicago Road and 11060 South Chicago Road. Tax key numbers as listed. Carrie?
The properties are on the map before you. The applicants have come today to make a presentation, so what I will do is turn it over to them after I say that staff has reviewed the application and recommends that the Plan Commission approve the site and building plans for the subject properties with the condition that all building and fire codes are met. So staff will now turn it over to a representative from We Energies.
And for the record, name and address. Make sure the mic's on. Give it a second after you turn it on.
Testing.
Yep, you're good.
What's that, his name?
My name is Rick O'Connor, and I am a project manager with We Energies. My address is 7720 Milwaukee Avenue in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin.
Thank you.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to meet with all of you today. What I am asking for is approval from the Plan Commission for expansion of the coal pile, our coal storage area at the Oak Creek Power Plant. We're looking to double the size of the coal storage area from its current 15 acres to a total of 30 acres. That would increase the storage from 750,000 tons to about 1.5 million tons. Some additional equipment will need to be installed. We will install a coal stacker. That's essentially a coal conveyor that takes the coal out to the pile and stacks it on top of the pile. We'll install a coal reclaimer. That's another conveyor that's underground that pulls the coal off the bottom of the pile, brings it back to the power plant. We will need to relocate one of American Transmission Company's high voltage power lines to make room for the pile, as well as we'll need to install a coal pile runoff basin to collect any of the wastewater or any of the stormwater that comes off of the coal pile. This is a simple schematic, really, of our coal system. All of our coal comes in by train, comes into a rotary car dumper. Ideally, we send the coal directly from the rotary car dumper to the crusher tower. It's crushed, and then it goes to the various power plants, the Oak Creek units or the Elm Road Generating Station units. Oop, we can go back a minute. In the event that the coal silos are filled in the plant, if we can't go directly from the trains, then the coal goes to storage. It either goes to the inside storage or it goes to the outside coal storage area. So essentially what we have is we have two variables. We have coal that comes on an irregular basis. Typically we average about a train a day, but that can come 2 trains a day, can come 3 trains a day, so that's quite variable. As well as we have a variable on the back end, which is our power generation. The coal storage really is our buffer in between. So as the coal deliveries vary and as our power generation varies, our coal storage goes up and down. What we're looking to do is add additional coal storage here for two reasons. The first reason is what we call the lumpiness of the coal deliveries. As I indicated, sometimes the coal trains, ideally they'd come one per day throughout the week, but they really don't come that way. For a good example, for this winter, we had some weeks where quite a few of the trains didn't come, and you start losing inventory in those situations, as well as the other variable here is our power generation. We're expecting to dispatch the Oak Creek and the Elm Road units quite a bit more, which is going to drive additional need for coal at this site. This is a zoomed out picture of the site. We're about a 1,000-acre site. I think you're all familiar with where it's located. This is Highway 32. The coal storage area is in the center of the site. We're about 3/4 of a mile from the main gate, and we're about half a mile from the Barton Oaks subdivision, the east end of Elm Road. This is a zoomed-in photo of the existing coal pile, of the existing indoor coal storage building. Right here is, well, this whole area is our, what we call the rail loop. This is the car dumper, so the coal comes in here, and it's either directed out to the existing coal storage or to the indoor pile, and then it's brought back in and sent either north to the Elm Road plant or south to the Oak Creek plant. This area highlighted in red is where we're looking to install the new coal pile. We looked at a couple of different locations. I think as you're familiar, we're really constrained to put all the coal handling within the rail loop. So the only available areas outside of this area is in here. And this is an area that has about 8 different high voltage transmission lines. They cut through there, so it's a pretty expensive option to try to relocate those lines, as well as it would take a pretty extensive power outage to relocate those. There's an area south of the existing coal pile. This has a coal storage as the coal runoff basin down here, so this was not ideal to move, as well as there's wetlands and additional power lines in this area, so this area didn't work out as well. It really just leaves this area for the expansion. And it really is the ideal location because you're closest to the car dumper and you're closest to the crusher tower where you're bringing the coal back. After the plan review meeting here tonight with you, we will file our CA application with the Public Service Commission, and we'll have several applications that we'll need to file with the DNR. There's an air permit modification that we'll have to file, as well as we have some wetland permits and some wastewater permits that we'll have to file. Schedule is to get everything filed this month. We would look to receive all of our permits and our approvals in the spring of next year. We'd order the equipment spring of next year after receiving the approvals. Equipment should arrive in 2016, and we'd have the system up and operational in 2017. We did add one additional photo here. There was a question as far as whether you could see the new coal pile from off of the site. So we took a look at a couple of different locations. This is, of course, Google Map, and it's nice and convenient. They have Street View on there online. This is the east end of Elm Road, right over by the Barton Oaks subdivision. This is the stack for the Oak Creek units, the new AQCS. You can barely see it, but that is the top of the coal storage building there, and it's about 120 feet high. The new coal pile is going to be about 55 feet high, so you can barely see the coal storage building. You're certainly not going to be able to see the new coal pile from this location. And we also looked just from the entrance on Highway 32. Likewise, you are unable to see where the new coal pile area would be from the new entrance on Highway 32. And this just gives you an overview aerial shot from the Barton Oaks area toward the new coal pile area, just that half-mile distance. And there's essentially a berm in this area in the landfill, really, that blocks that view.
Okay, so we're doubling the capacity of your coal pile, one, to meet the needs for harsh winters like we had last year, so you have a better coal mix, if I was listening correctly?
Correct. Yeah, there's a couple of things we're doing. We're certainly adding Powder River Basin coal, some western coal, which is a lower cost per BTU.
Okay,
And that's certainly the goal here, to facilitate that as well.
and it's within your rail line?
It is within the rail line.
When you designed that setup originally, was the concept to expand that coal storage, or,
No, the intent at that time was not to expand.
okay. And from what I see from your images, it's not visible from the road because the pile would not be as high as the existing pile?
It'd be similar height to the existing pile, 55 feet, although this area is about 20 feet lower, so you are correct, it is lower.
All right, questions?
Yeah. the
Commissioner
question-
Siepert.
Okay, the question I have is coal dust. Do you generate any dust when you're piling these coal stacks or on the outside?
Yeah, certainly the coal dust is regulated by the DNR. We go to great lengths through a couple of methods. One is dust collection. So we have some very large dust collectors that are on all of the coal conveyors that collect the dust, as well as we have what's called dust suppression. It's essentially spraying water and some chemicals. So when we stack the coal out, put it on the pile, it's shielded by a water spray that keeps that dust down.
Okay.
So DNR monitors all of that stuff,
Correct,
not Oak Creek.
correct.
Commissioner Chandler.
Can you provide a little more information on why the huge increase? You did identify that you expect that the power plants want a little more. However, it looks like the numbers are doubled. So can you provide some feedback on why the cold storage has doubled?
And that's a very good question. Yeah, it's really two reasons why we'd be increasing it. As you indicate, it is because we expect the market demand for the power from these units to increase. And that's really driven by, these are very efficient units. They're some of our lowest cost units. So these will dispatch quite a bit going forward. As well as probably the biggest variable is inconsistent rail deliveries. And it's been a big driving factor for us.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Siepert again?
Yeah, we've increased the coal usage. What about the coal ash? What do we do with the increase of that?
The coal ash as well is handled as it currently is, and the majority of our coal ash we're able to utilize off in concrete mixtures, find various byproducts for that use, so there would be an increase in that ash that would be utilized elsewhere.
Do you need additional equipment to handle that, or?
No, we're not expecting any additional equipment for that.
Okay.
Commissioner Dickman?
According to the article in the paper this morning, and I'll just read it here. It says, We Energies is forecasting savings as high as $9 million to $12 million a year. And that's based because of the lower cost coal that you would be getting?
Yeah, that allows us to dispatch this plant more. Right now, there are times where we're limited on how much we can operate this plant just because you can't keep up with the coal flow. So if you have a larger coal storage area, there's no need to essentially run back the dispatch on the power plant.
Okay, then speaking as a customer, not as a planning commissioner, they're going to be asking for a raise that, in January of next year, and I assume next year after. Is this going to help to steady out any increases to the customer base?
Yes, this will have a pretty quick payback. Total cost of this project is about $60 million. As you indicated, the savings are on the order of $9 to $12 million a year. So we're, anywhere from a 5 to 7 year payback.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Motion on 4A.
Dickman makes a motion, the Plan Commission approve the site and building plans submitted by Pat Lawler of We Energies for the properties located at 10770 and 11060 South Chicago Road with the condition that all building and fire codes are met.
Seifert second.
Roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Krillo, aye.
Streety, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Moving to 4B, plan review, site building, landscaping, and lighting plan submitted by Blair Williams Wired Properties for 2 mixed-use buildings located at 331 West Drexel Avenue, tax key number 813-9031-000. Representing Wired is Blair Williams, who's here. So, socializing.
Socializing.
Welcome.
Thank you. Podium or table?
Either one?
Whatever you are comfortable doing.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate the time today. I see a lot of familiar faces, but this is hopefully the culmination of the approvals for 2 of the buildings that we have been tasked with developing on Main Street. And these are the 2 most prominent buildings to be located on the Main Street portion of the development here at Drexel Town Square. Specifically, we're talking about what we have always referred to as the B3 and C3 buildings. For the sake of this conversation, B3 will be Building A. It is the western of the 2 buildings located on the left side of Main Street as we look at this diagram. And Building B is the C3 building. We've worked very hard on arriving at a design that not only accomplishes fundamental objectives for the types of spaces we're trying to create for the consumer in the form of the residential units on the upper floors and the retail downstairs, but most importantly, we've tried to maintain a series of sensitivities to how Main Street will feel over time and the pedestrian experience that we'll be creating for the constituents of Oak Creek and the visitors to this community. You'll notice that the buildings in many respects appear as mirrored images to each other. That is, in fact, by design, and there's a couple of things that drive that. Most notably, they front on the square. They are one of the walls of the outdoor room, kind of metaphorically, that the town square represents. And we want to create a very strong physical image of that wall. In fact, it's one of the driving design considerations in the design guidelines for Drexel Town Square. So you'll see that they mirror each other with interesting angles created on both the east and the west end. That's so those buildings not only turn and face the square, but also wrap around and present themselves to folks that are coming from the east, whether it be from the north, whether it be the northeast or the northwest. There are some subtle differences between the buildings. Most notably, the C3 building is 3 stories, and the B3 building is 4 stories. There are 2 primary considerations that drove our decision-making in arriving at those designs. One, as you consider the views that wrap all the way around these buildings, and those views obviously are what the folks who reside in these apartments will ultimately be engaging every day, the views towards the west are favorable in many respects. We'll have a number of new, very interesting and compelling buildings that will be developed to the west, whether it be Barrett Visionaries Apartments or the ultimate development of the parcel located at the northwest corner of Drexel Town Square in total. The buildings looking at each other across the street, very dynamic. That's a terrific urban environment. In fact, that's one of the things that defines Main Streets everywhere, is how buildings on either side of a street engage each other. That said, the views to the east and to the northeast are somewhat less engaging in important ways. We have a series of outparcels. Buildings there will take on different forms than the buildings in Main Street proper, and we thought it appropriate not only to think about how the buildings would present from Main Street itself, but also how the people in the buildings would engage their world. So we thought that the views to the west carried premium, and as a result, we did 4 stories over there with only 3 stories offering those views back to the east. There was another consideration, and that was parking, and I know that'll be a topic of conversation tonight, but one of the things that we're able to do is do underground parking under the footprint of these buildings. Obviously, if you add another floor of apartments, but you have the same footprint of parking, you are impacting the number of stalls available per building for underground parking for those residents. There is one more important consideration as shown here in the arrow that connects A and B. And in fact, in the previous drawing, it was a little bit more apparent. We have created a pedestrian alley or walk-through that moves directly through the buildings, which is important for a couple of key reasons. One, the parking for these retailers is located ostensibly behind these buildings. These are four-sided buildings. We don't have the luxury of a back of a building facing to an unwanted elevation. Here we do have four-sided architecture. It needs to be interesting on all sides, but most importantly, the folks that park behind these buildings need to get to the front of the buildings without walking all the way around. Otherwise, it would be too complicated for those retailers to drive their business. The other thing that will happen, of course, is that these retailers will have back doors. They'll have front doors on Main Street. In fact, a significant percentage of their customers will use those doors. However, in inclement weather in particular, folks will want to be able to park in the back and enter through those back doors. This pedestrian pathway that exists all the way through, we've lined up to a central crosswalk on Main Street, which leads me to a second important consideration as we considered this design. The block is relatively long. The buildings are relatively large. By breaking these buildings down into pieces, what we've done is extend the feeling to the pedestrian of Main Street by a block. As you walk down this street, instead of a monolithic building confronting you as you walk all the way down a long block, there will be more visual interest and there will be opportunities for planting areas, for...
Laser pointers.
Oh, there we go.
Here, use this one. It works. At least you can give us an idea where you're looking.
If a pedestrian is walking from the square, as an example, they'll likely use one of the four crosswalks provided to them. And as they move down Main Street, this will feel like a building. And then this will feel like a building. But because of the crosswalk connecting the two sides of the street, in some respects, this will feel like a smaller block. It'll be a comfortable environment for the pedestrian because it's not simply a blank wall extending all the way down the street. If, in fact, we were to have a view that shows what's happening to the east, to the north of this, this block does not have the same type of logical breaks. In fact, as you go about halfway up that block, you get into the queuing corridor for traffic to and from Drexel. And you can see that, I'll use this one. You can see that here. In fact, the turn lane starts here so that they can queue to get out of Drexel. And remember that this is an uncontrolled intersection here. So this is fully signalized here. This is fully signalized here. This intersection is offering left turns in and left turns off of Drexel. And the queuing here means that this block, while still pedestrian friendly, is going to have a different feel than the Main Street portion that we're talking about here with the B3 and C3 buildings. The presentation of these buildings to the pedestrian will be dynamic. The material selections include very high quality materials used in appropriate contexts and in appropriate ratios, we believe. Overall, the materials include a substantial amount of glass on the ground floor. In fact, if I were to describe the primary material of the ground floor, it would be glass. We're creating very airy entries into these retail spaces. And by design, we are including portions of these storefront systems that will not be transparent glass. These will be opportunities for signage, but it will also give us the opportunity to put demising walls between retailers without interrupting the glass feeling of those storefronts as you move down Main Street. As you move up through the building, you can see that we have essentially channeled balconies recessed back into the building. We think it's very important not to have balconies that simply project off the face of the building. From the user's perspective inside those apartments, that balcony becomes an outdoor room if it is tucked into the unit and is offering opportunities, in fact, to actually see it from sidelight windows, and it creates the opportunity for dynamic glass pushed back from the building to create articulation within the building itself. So we believe that these balconies really create an opportunity for visual interest in the building and also offers the residents the opportunity to engage with the street life below them, which we think is one of the key factors that will attract folks to the community. In terms of materials, you can see that we have wood panel or cement fiberboard or similar in these areas, which are recessed back in plane. And then we have brick cladding indicated in all of the lighter areas on this building. This is Building A, which, remember, at 4 stories is the building on the west side of Main Street. We do also have some fairly strong design elements occurring at the ends of the building. We've done a couple of different things. The design team at Rinkeachung has done remarkable creative things to help create visual interest and help soften the edges of what is otherwise a fairly rectangular building. One of the things that they've done is ease the corners down in the retail locations. So those corners of those buildings will face out at a 45-degree angle as opposed to coming to a hard edge, which will create some of those more traditional Main Street openings that you see in buildings that have been developed over the course of the last 100 years. They've also created some elements located up at the roof line that emphasize the base, middle, top composition of the building and create visual interest and definition of the corners of the building. This corner is facing, this is the side that faces Main Street. This is the south elevation of the building on the west side of the street. And you can see this detail up at the top. And then one of the things that we've done working with the first generation signage requirements and allowances under the code, a very dynamic signage opportunity along the end of this building to give it dynamic identity and to help define how the square interacts with these buildings moving forward. We do project a restaurant, and we've had active conversations with a number of retailers for the purposes of confidentiality. We're not revealing those at this time, but I can tell you that we're very excited about the mix of retailers in particular that we've been able to further conversations with. This does not show it because this is a building elevation. However, there is outdoor patio space contemplated for this location, which is right at the view terminus of 6th Street. As you were driving north on 6th Street from City Hall along that side of the square, you would be looking towards this patio, and this patio then has a view looking back at the town square. You can look at slide 20 there, yep. So you can see that here, and what's happening is this is that 6th Street extension here, and you can see now how we start moving around the building and moving from a 2-dimensional elevation into a 3-dimensional rendering. One, how these balconies both recess back into the building and then also project off the face of the building. We believe these apartments in particular will be some of the most compelling housing units built in Metro Milwaukee in some time. Very, very dynamic in large expansive patios facing back on the town square. You can imagine during a farmer's market or a celebration how fun those views would be. And those are some relatively large apartments located there. This also gives you a view back towards the back of the building, and you can start to see how some of that articulation of the building is working. In the back of the building, we take a different approach. I noted on the front of the building that we don't want the balconies to project out because we believe that they interfere with the pedestrian's experience on the street. I'm going to suggest the opposite on the back now. One of the things that we do know is that these apartments face out onto a parking lot, and parking lots are not the reason folks are going to move into high-end apartments. One of the things that we've done is we've expanded the size of many of these balconies. They're projecting off the building, and we're doing some very interesting and creative screening in order to create a sense of privacy when you're out on those patios so that you don't feel exposed to those surface parking lots. Interestingly, because we can treat these as louvers, not that they'll be movable, but because of the way they'd be constructed, it would obstruct your view if you're looking down, but it would not obstruct a view coming up through. So sunlight would make it down through onto the floor of the deck, but you wouldn't be looking down through onto the parking lot. And one thing that does for us is that if you are inside the apartment and you are looking out of the windows towards those balconies, you won't be looking down. The balcony will be in front of you and your perspective will be forced up, so you'll be getting the sky and the skyline as opposed to a view down onto the surface parking areas. This is the break between the two buildings, and you can get a sense here a little bit about how wide that is. That's 15 feet, right, Steve? So we've created a 15-foot space between the two buildings, which means that for the pedestrian walking through, it will not feel cavernous. It'll feel open, and we have glass, storefront glass, lining it. So retailers will actually have the opportunity for additional signage and additional presentation of their goods and fare in order to make this building each of these buildings feel 4-sided, which means I'm kind of building a 6-sided building. The roof line is very clean. However, we articulate the building using trellised elements up at the top of the balconies. So from every perspective, this building will have visual interest. At no time will it feel monolithic. On the back side here, you can see an interesting pattern of cement fiberboard, and then you get the masonry that reaches around the building and creates those hard corners of the building. If you move to the other building, you'll see certain similarities. Notably, here you'll have the back. This is the back of the building again, so you don't have as much storefront retail presence on the back of the building. If we can go to maybe even the rendering might do a better job of capturing how that works. There you go. Use 19. Use 19. So this is the other side of the street. You can see 3 stories versus 4 stories. But you can see similar elements with the projecting rooftop element, the balcony that is actually recessed, and you can kind of see there how that is in fact recessed. A twin sign for the building across the street. What we've done in many respects is invert the color palette in order to create a dynamic feel so that you always know which building you're looking at. You'll know which building you're in front of. We do think that one of the risks of master plan development is that the architecture becomes too similar. One of the great things, even with having one terrific firm here doing the architecture, is that we've got dynamic diversity in all of the buildings that are being built on this site. We want to maintain some similarities. So again, you'll see the very glassy storefront. You'll see a very similar pattern in how the masonry piers come down and meet the ground in order to create that sense of kind of solid foundation for the building. You'll also see those moments where the glass becomes translucent or opaque in order to accommodate either signage or demising walls in the retailers. You'll see the strong corner elements. One of the things that this picture captures that we haven't mentioned yet is that we actually have dynamic angles that are established in this building. We think that Town Square is the biggest selling point of all of this. And we believe that being in a building that runs directly away from the square shouldn't mean you don't have an opportunity to engage it. Balconies offer one opportunity, but what the designers have done here is we've actually almost opened the building up in a series of louvers. These windows are on an angle that give a view back towards the square. From this side, you may catch the hotel. You may catch some of City Hall and the library. In this building, imagine it the opposite. These actually face the other way, but you can just see these windows that are set up in the portion of that fin that is opened away from the building. So we're treating them similarly, but kind of reversing the thought on it in order to create visual interest. The material composition is virtually the same here. Same types of materials, different palette. But again, the intent is for us to create a very dynamic design with very long-lasting, high-quality materials. We believe in materials that don't require regular ongoing maintenance in order to maintain appearance or maintain their structural or mechanical effectiveness. We use high-quality cement fiberboard materials that are pre-finished so they don't require painting, and as a result, they don't peel or start to look crummy after a period of time. We anticipate using fiberglass window systems here, which are very high quality, very solid, very effective. And just generally, our intent is to create a pedestrian experience that is definitive of what Drexel Town Square will come to mean for the consumer. Parking, quickly. For the residential, we have 100% underground heated parking. We have a total parking ratio of about 1.5 stalls per unit. In our experience, that is a substantial parking count. 1 per bedroom has historically been one way that folks look at parking count. But as we've developed in urban environments throughout Metro Milwaukee and elsewhere, at a parking ratio of 1.5 to 1, we're typically in exactly the right neighborhood. One thing that is idiosyncratic, this building is slightly underparked. This building is slightly overparked, but people are living here because it's an urban environment. Walking across the street to an underground heated parking stall is not something that we believe will be complicated for folks. As you look at the overall parking, it now becomes important to think about how retail consumers will park and how guests to apartments may park. And what it then becomes important to do is think about the global parking environment. As you look at what have historically been the B parcels and the C parcels, if you look at the A parcels and the B parcels, we believe that all of these fields of parking will service all of the buildings that front on them. In fact, if Drexel Town Square behaves the way we believe it will, folks won't just park at the store they're going to and then turn around and go home. People will make more than one stop when they come to Drexel Town Square. They may drop off their dry cleaning and get a cup of coffee, or they may go get dinner and, or they may go to the chiropractor or get a massage or get their hair done and then go have lunch. That being the case, the street front parking, the town square parking, all of the parking that's located reasonably proximate to these buildings will become the type of parking that people will use when they come to Drexel Town Square. We believe the parking count for these various buildings is sufficient to support the anticipated development of each of these buildings. And with the underground parking provided for the residential, we're able to remove that residential parking load from the parking that's being provided in the retail spaces or on street. And no?
No.
Okay.
Keep talking.
Okay. We do know that the parking at times will become constrained. It's a sign of a successful urban environment. And at times, people may need to walk more than 50 feet or more than 50 yards to arrive at their ultimate destination. But again, that's one of the highlights of a successful urban environment. We are very comfortable with the parking as presented, and we believe that we've handled the parking for the residential the way that we need to. And short of any other conversation that I could present on parking, I'm pleased to answer questions on any of the development, any of the design, and we may want to start with parking for Commissioner Siepert.
Well, I just look at the parking, and I really think that you could end up having a major problem with, underground parking is fine, but you got 4 stories. Everybody that I know that lives in an apartment has basically 2 cars, okay? And then you add some more. I just think that you kind of underestimated this parking problem.
Well,
That's my opinion.
Yeah. Well, we have done a lot of this in environments like this. And in fact, Shorewood, I don't mean to bring up other municipalities, but in Shorewood, where we did 2 buildings just like these directly across the street from each other, we are overparked in the building where we have 2 stalls per unit. In fact, we're renting to neighbors and do that regularly. In the other building, we have less than 2 stalls, and we're also renting to neighbors. So we're comfortable with the parking count on the residential. If you look at this from the perspective of the number of bedrooms, we have 14 one-bedroom apartments in this development. Certainly not all of those folks are going to have 2 cars. Some number of those folks will have 1 car. Okay. We have 35 total 2-bedroom apartments. In our experience in Shorewood and in downtown Milwaukee and elsewhere, some percentage of those will be occupied by single people. Mm-hmm. And they typically will not have 2 cars. And then finally, we have 13 3-bedroom units. Those are much more typically occupied by 2 folks, and those much more typically would have 2 cars associated with them. With an equal number of 2 bedrooms and 1 bedrooms, we get pretty comfortable with the notion, 3 bedrooms and 1 bedrooms, we get pretty comfortable with the notion that it's at worst 1.5 per unit on those, and the balance has worked for us in the past. So, short of reducing unit count, we don't have an effective mechanism to increase parking count. And we believe it's contextually appropriate.
Well, I just think that you're going to have a lot of activity at the Drexel Town Square. There's going to be a lot of people. You've got businesses. People are going to come in. And I just think we could run into a parking problem as time goes on because it's going to be very active.
I certainly hope that it's extremely active.
Well,
and
I'm just saying,
right.
You got Myers and, City Hall, the library. And
Myers has a very big parking lot. Let me just say this. I think for the purposes of parking and crowds, I'd like to see that place as crowded as possible, because I think that shows that we designed it correctly, we made it a place that people want to go. This big fear that's been hanging over people's heads that they're doing this grand plan and they haven't thought any of this out, I think is so unfounded. And this design, I think, has incorporated all of those elements that we wanted to see here. When people asked about where retail is, well, here's the retail, the places you can walk to, park your car and go to 15 different stores or restaurants or whatever. This is a design that took the big design from the entire project and squeezed it into to your small part of that. So to me, it captures what we need for parking. I don't want to see a sea of parking lots that have no cars in them.
Well, I mean, to put this into a little bit of context, I mean, the Meyer parking lot is enormous.
Right.
I don't remember the last count. Is it 700, 600? So we have 600 parking stalls for 109, just bear with me, I have a point. We have 600 parking stalls for 193,000 square foot building, 600 parking stalls. We have 460 parking stalls for what you see right there. So we have more than 2/3 as many parking stalls as the entire Meyer parking lot does. If we have a parking problem, very respectfully, it's a very high-class problem, because it means that we really are hitting it out of the park.
And I'm not picking on, I'm just saying that looking at it from my perspective, I thought parking could be a potential problem. That's just the way I felt.
Other questions? Commissioner Chandler.
So you identified that Building A has fewer parking?
They have the exact same number of parking stalls. However, Parking A has more units. Or Building A has more units. So Building A has, they both have 48 underground parking stalls. But when you look at the count, we have 62 total, and I think we're at 36 and 26 for the two.
Oh.
So we have almost 2 to 1. I mean, we have 26 apartments and 48 stalls in Building B. And then we have 36 apartments and 48 stalls in Building A. So each apartment, and we include parking in the rent. So every apartment will come with one underground heated parking stall, and it will be in the building you live in. A certain number of the overflow cars from Building A would park in Building B.
Okay, so the actual footprint of Building A and B are the same?
It's
So that's
almost
why
identical.
You can't expand the parking in Building A, is that correct?
They're basically, I mean, it's very, very close to exactly the same footprint. It's it's like 8 feet or not even 8 feet per building, or in width at the bottom of the building. If you go to the bottom of the building, there's a little bit of an idiosyncratic difference down in the bottom portion there.
Okay, and also for the parking, that would not be available to the stores, the retail,
Yeah,
the
and
employees?
this is a good presentation of that. So this is the parking lot behind the western building. This is the parking lot behind the eastern building. This is the street. I think technically it's an alley, but the street that runs and crosses through the center of Main Street. There is a ramped entrance, very easily accessible off of that alley, that goes down and underneath. The residents will have garage door openers, and it won't be publicly accessible. Without a garage door opener, you don't get into the parking structure.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Carrillo.
It's noted in here that you haven't finalized what the ground floors would look like, but do you have an estimate of how many retailers might be in each building?
If you could, let's see if we can find the plan that shows the buildings without all the parking. That one's fine. There's a couple of ways to think about it. What is likely is that there will be one user in this location, and then 1 or 2 in this location. So let's call that 3. That's probably 1 for 4, and it could be 5, 6, and 7, or it could be just 6 in that building. So I would say that this building wants to be somewhere between 5 and 8 at the outside. This building, very, very much similar. We have started to have conversations about how to solve for bathrooms for the folks that are on the town square. And so there may be a portion of this building that is not a traditional retailer. This probably wants to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 5 there. We think we'll have somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 13 retailers in these buildings by the time it's said and done.
Okay, one other quick question. On the layouts, you have different color coding. I think this one has it like in a red and a yellow. That must be for signage? What are you
Yeah.
thinking that's in that area?
We've talked about a variety of, if there is not a demising wall located there, so if there's 2 tenants next to each other, we've put those in strategic places where we think a wall may go to define that space. Okay. If there's a wall there, we wouldn't want it to be see-through because you wouldn't want to see the structure behind it. If there's not a wall there, we would still keep it that way because we're maintaining this pattern, but at that point it could become translucent frosted,
Okay, so
for example, with a signage opportunity for the retailer themselves.
Okay.
Was that
Yep.
accurate, Steve? Okay.
Just want to make a quick note to the idea of the fin of the windows so that you can see a square. I think that's a great idea. I think it'll just make it so much nicer.
Well, and it's subtle. You can actually start to see it here,
Right.
too. And what that also does is it gives us the opportunity to create a wall on those balconies. So
have
we're
that
using the design both directions, both what's created in the negative space behind it and then also using the windows to slant towards the square.
Is there a special texture or what kind of material are you using for the underground of the eaves that come out or underneath them?
Those will be wood framed.
Just-
Stained wood framed is what
Okay.
we're contemplating right now. I don't think we've got metal or anything underneath there.
Commissioner Dickman?
First of all, I'm very impressed with the architecture of the building, the angles and, breaking up the view. And I guess I wanted to go back and I'll call on Doug if I might. Doug, you remember years ago we went down to Illinois and we reviewed that layout, and I recall it was the same type deal, if you might. They had the stores, underneath, and they had the apartments above. I don't think there was anything like this. Do you think so? I mean, as far as the, it just seemed to be more plain. I'm trying to remember back how it was, but I was impressed with the idea of it there. But this just seems to be so much more architecturally interesting.
Sure. Certainly on the pure mixed-use buildings on the Glen, I think you're right. It was really more retail-centric, and they didn't have nearly as much detail as some of these buildings do. They did have the I guess the advantage of having a larger site and be able to mix a number of different residential concepts in there on much larger acreages. But I think for the Main Street buildings, if you were, I think that I'd stack these up against those in the Glen any day.
Any day. Yep. Thank you.
We have a much better architectural team here.
Alderman Guzikowski.
Boy, what I'm seeing here, this is a very, very inviting, it's just complete. It's really got every component there. I love it. This is just amazing. Couple questions. Number one, any concerns for security? Do we need any police department presence or a location if they were need to be housed there? I don't know if that's been in discussions at all.
We've had conversations to accommodate, we have a plan in place to accommodate that in conjunction with the public bathrooms that would be created here. And if the police department is desirous of having a presence here, we've accommodated them in our design.
The other question, what's going to be the clientele with the apartments and whatnot? I mean, what are we talking? I mean, I don't even know price ranges, but what's your target market?
We believe that this is an entirely new option, not just in Oak Creek, but anywhere kind of south of downtown in a lot of ways. And we have been very successful in working with clientele who are looking for a more urban environment in the community in which they already live. We think we'll be successful with folks who live in Oak Creek today and may be interested in selling their home, may no longer have the interest in the upkeep required and the maintenance required to continue to live in the community they love. I received a call, and I won't give quite too much information because it would expose him, but I received a call from a gentleman yesterday who told me that he will be renting the apartment that's on the top floor right there. He said, I want the biggest, best apartment you've got. My business is located very, very close to this. My kids are gone. I'm selling the house. I don't want to have a house anymore, but I want the best apartment I can get. And he's told me he's renting that one, so I'm going to have to take his word for it. So I think we'll do well there. I think we will do well with folks who are relocating to Oak Creek, but don't yet know where it is exactly that they want to live. Executives, corporate folks who are coming to work with the major employers in the community. I think we'll do very well with couples who have split professions. One may work to the north, and one may work to the south, and this is a good central location for them, and they don't want to be in a traditional suburban apartment building. I think we'll get a full spread here. I think we'll get divorcees. I hate to say that divorce is good for business, but it is. But what that means is we're offering a lifestyle option for folks that are in a moment of transition.
Yeah, it looks like you're going to be bringing the best of all worlds here. And then lastly, when do you guys think you would start kicking the dirt? And
we would love nothing better than to start this fall. If winter is anything like last winter, and all the current projections are that we're in for another tough one, it would be a very costly endeavor to find ourselves in that position. The architectural team has moved faster than anyone could reasonably have expected them to. We will have a pretty comprehensive set of documents. I mean, we moved forward short of approvals because we believe in the project so much. And we may find ourselves in a position, if we get some very favorable conditions, to at least get foundations in the ground. The most costly things to deal with in the cold weather is concrete. Anything that you're pouring is going to be a harder project. And the way this thing is built is you excavate, and then you dig out the footings and the foundations, and you pour concrete. And then you form the exterior foundation walls, and you pour those. Then the Lincoln logs all come in, the precast concrete. Temperature's not a big problem for that, but then you have to pour a 4-inch layer of concrete on top of that, and you have to grout it all solid. And it's those thin pours that create bigger problems. We'll do our best, but right now my party line is going to be as early in spring as fortune allows us. If we can accelerate faster than that, we will.
thanks.
Commissioner Siepert.
I have a question about handicap parking. Pete maybe can answer this. What are the requirements for handicap for the number of spaces? I see only 5 handicaps on my sheet, and I'm just wondering, that seems to be on the narrow or the small side.
I don't have the ratio on top of my head, but I do believe that they do meet the handicap requirements. But I would have to double check on that. I don't have.
Would you check on it? Because
If I could just check my encyclopedia. Do you guys know what the ratio is?
3 per, if you're just under 60 is 3, so I think we're 3 on the east side and maybe 1 less on the west side, so it meets the cable and the ADA documents.
it just seems that there's more senior people out, and handicap parking sometimes seems to be a problem that I've noticed. And I just happen to see 5, and I'm just wondering if that ratio fits your parking scheme. That's the only question I have.
Yeah, it's what if you couldn't hear him, what he was saying is that the way the code is written, if you have 60 up to 60 stalls, you need 3. So there are just under 60 stalls in the one side here, and there are 3, and then on the other side they use the ratio again, and the ratio calculates out to 2. So it does meet the code requirements, but certainly if there's given that we've got cross interests in terms of maximizing parking count and then also protecting the interests for handicap parking, we'd certainly be willing to investigate it, but parking is dear, as you've suggested yourself.
Donfred?
Yeah.
Commissioner Chandler.
So if you're walking in from the street to your apartments, where's the entrance?
If you could go to the Main Street rendering for me. It's generally speaking, it's it's located. This is the elevator, and that's one of the. There's a stairwell there, and there's a stairwell there, and there's an elevator there. So the entry into the residential is generally located right where that elevator is. We've actually got beautiful rendered, what was that?
The pathway that you have going between the buildings?
No, it's not directly, you can't cross the street from one building to the other without jaywalking to go from entry to entry. What lines up is the passageway between the two buildings. And it's on that, oh, there it is. So it's there, and then the crosswalk is there or there. And we actually have some beautifully rendered, as we've started to talk about interior finishes. I mean, we're working towards construction documents now, so we're making a lot of decisions. But it's going to be a very attractive environment. It'll be a double vestibule, so you can enter out of the cold, get into a locked vestibule. You can then buzz your host, and they can let you in, or you can use a fob in order to swipe it and let the door unlock so you can let yourself in.
Okay. And then my other question has to do with the colors. What are the actual colors of these items? So is this white?
It's, what we're proposing is very close to white.
Okay.
Does it have a different name?
Or do you have some samples we can see?
This is actually, it's not quite glazed, but it's very light, it's painted, kind of.
Please.
These are all the surfaces of this building?
Yeah, so this is a burnished block, so it feels like, looks like stone in many respects.
Where does this go?
That is the dark on
Where it
white
says
building.
retailer?
Yeah, that's right. So
Oh,
this,
okay.
that product.
Kind of heavy.
So the white, the brick sample that you have is the white, and then the burnished block is the dark, located at the base of the building. So you can tell, that is located in the recessed areas of the building.
So these same colors, so these same materials will be used in building A and B except for the white one?
Well,
Is that correct?
actually, what it is it's all very complementary. The dark building has a light base. So I kind of said we flipped the palette a little bit, right? So this is the brick up above, and then this is the cement fiber panel that's in the recessed locations of the building.
Show and tell.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Dickman?
My question kind of was answered. I was going to ask about elevators, and you just happened to talk about it, because are they going to be external, internal? And I assume they're in both buildings?
Each building has one elevator. The buildings aren't especially long or large. And the elevators start in the garage level and go up through the extent of the building.
Okay, thank you.
It seems more of a,
Other questions? I can tell you your story about the people inquiring. I think I've told Jerry Frankie this, and probably Matt as well. I've never had people asking me about when apartment developments are going to be completed so they can move into them. And for both your property and Rick Barrett's, that has been the case. Barrett's is very popular, and I'm sure yours will be equally so. So that says to me that people respect what you're building, and they understand the concept of why they want to be at Drexel Town Square, and they want to be there to live there. So your story definitely hits home with me. So great presentation, by the way.
Thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Chandler.
So is there just one entrance?
For the residential, there's one primary entrance located on Main Street. You know, a decent percentage of the time, folks will drive home. They'll enter from the garage and they'll go up that way. But we really do move folks to one primary entrance on Main Street.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Otherwise, we need a motion for 4B.
And somebody else.
Oh, I do have one final question. Can you just go over again the differences in height? just for clarity.
Yeah, the fundamental difference is that the building to the west is 4 stories, and the building to the east is 3 stories. We're basically removing one floor level that's 11.4 floor to floor. So one building is about 11 feet 4 inches or so shorter than the other.
But why?
Oh, a couple different things. One, parking constraints. We wanted to make sure that we didn't put ourselves in a position where we had more apartments than we had available underground parking. And 2, we believe the views to the west are superior to the views to the east. And as a result, we just wanted to make sure that we emphasized those views to the west.
Thank you.
Still need a motion.
Guzekowski makes a motion to accept review site building, landscaping, and lighting plans submitted by Blair Williams, Wired Properties, for 2 mixed buildings located at 331 West Drexel Avenue.
Can I just jump in here and say that you're not accepting, you're approving?
Yeah.
Rubin, I apologize. Thank you.
Thanks for that clarification.
You
Need
have to
need a second?
Chandler, second.
Roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Carrillo, aye.
Speedy, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Seifert, no.
Chandler, aye.
Thank you, Blair. One quick comment, I've yet to see a bad Matt Rinka or Rinka Chung design, so.
Can I ask real quickly?
Absolutely.
Did that motion include the conditions that were proposed?
Yeah, that's all I was
Yes, it
gonna
did.
ask.
Would you like him to read them? No? All right.
Just say the 4 is listed.
1 through 4.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. All right, C, and the final item is temporary use outdoor storage. Review a temporary use permit for the outdoor storage and assembly of monotube arms for the Howell Avenue construction located at 124 East Rawson Avenue. Pete?
Yes. As you quickly summarized, the applicant is requesting approval of an outdoor storage area located at 124 East Rawson Avenue for a period of 3 months. They are working in with the state DOT project and the resurfacing of Howell Avenue and replacing and installing the street light poles. So we're going to go from the yellow poles to the mono poles that you see over on Putes and Howell. And they need a location in which to store them and then also to assemble them in close proximity to the project. And so the applicant came in asking for a temporary use. This was back in September 16th. As the zoning, with the authority within the zoning administrator's position, I granted a 14-day period for them to be able to bring the product online. However, it's going to be for 3 months, so they needed to come before this commission to look for an additional time to do it. Staff reviewed, what other options there were. The one other option would be go to the southwest corner of the intersection of Rawson and Howell. And if you have been past there recently, there's been a lot of trucks and somewhat muddied up and not a real suitable site. Whereas this site has a gravel, hard surface to keep the materials clean, easy to access, easy to do some work and then haul on and off the site. So staff's recommendation is that the Plan Commission approve the temporary use permit for the outdoor storage and assembly of monotube arms of the northeast corner of the property located at 124 East Rawson Avenue until December 31st of 2014.
Questions? Commissioner Chandler?
For this storage area, is it covered or enclosed? It'll just be open space?
They'll be bringing in semi-trailers and trailer boxes, which they'll bring the monotube poles in, drop them, take them off.
And is this customary just to put it in an open space?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Johnson?
Just clarification, the monotube poles are the big signal poles that are out here at the intersection of Putes and Howell. That's what they're going to be setting up. So they're big bases, they're big poles. It looks like a light pole, but it's a lot bigger. This is just a place for them to land down and construct them for the project.
Any other questions?
Yeah, are they going to do any assembly of these poles, or are they going to come in complete?
Assemble 'em.
They should be pretty much, pieces. They'll have to hang the lights and everything. They'll stand up the straight pole first, and then they have to attach the arm on that pole at the intersection. So most of the work is going to be at the intersection,
Intersection and not on the
yep,
site?
just storage out here.
Okay.
Any other questions? Motion on 4C?
Actually, Dickman makes a motion, Plan Commission approve the temporary use permit for the outdoor storage and assembly of monotube arms on the northeast corner of the property located at 124 East Rawson Avenue until December 31st of 2014.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Judy, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Motion to adjourn?
Curlo moves to adjourn at 7:05.
Guzekowski, a second.
Roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Judy, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here, Mr. Degner. Have a great night. See you next Tuesday.